Hello there, I'm Bob Radocy.
I'm Debi Latour.
And we're creating these episodes to empower you as a person maybe with a hand absence, but to empower you learn about prosthetic devices.
This series is for people, as Bob said, with hand absence, but also for people who experience hand impairments.
And we're here to help you, but we're not from the government. This is a series that'll evolve. We hope it'll take about 7 episodes, but it's mainly here to help you. We want to educate you and help you understand the ocean of knowledge about prosthetics so that you can empower yourself, you can be a better consumer, or you can just learn more about upper extremity prosthetics in general. And this is who we are, and I'd like to let Deb take a few minutes and give you a little history about herself.
One of the reasons we're doing this is because we want to offer you several different perspectives. So from my perspective, I have a congenital limb difference. I was born without my right hand and forearm and have used a prosthesis since I was 1. But that doesn't mean that I only use a prosthesis. In fact, I can do all the activities that are important to me, both with a prosthesis as well as without. I understand the difference between using different kinds of prosthetic technologies and how it can make a difference in each and every one of our lives. Furthermore, because I'm so interested in this and because of my own passion for wanting to make a difference and help people, I became an occupational therapist over 45 years ago. And in the last 25 years have actually specialized in upper limb prosthetic rehabilitation and also speaking into the development of different technologies.
Deb was one of the first young children ever fit with a prosthesis. When she got started, they weren't fitting children with prosthesis at such a young age, and she had very proactive parents. And her parents worked with the Shriners Hospital system at the time. So she was one of the first young children. And what was that age? You were 3?
No, I was 1.
Oh, you were 1 year old.
I was 1 year old. I got my first prosthesis at the age of 14 months. And it was a passive mitt style. And then within a year, I got my first body power prosthesis.
So it was an education for the people, the health providers as well, because typically in that age, they weren't fitting children with prosthesis that young. So Deb was one of the individuals that were able to illustrate to them the value of that early prosthetic fitting, which we see today. They fit children now as young as 6 months of age typically, and get them to use, encourages them to be bilaterally functional and things like that.
Exactly, with those very age-appropriate developmental activities that children engage in at that level, 4 to 6 months. Children are beginning to clap their hands and find their fingers at midline. They want to be able to hold a cup and bring it to their mouth. Children are beginning to sit. And we all know that when we're first learning to sit, we might topple over. So to be able to have limb length that is symmetrical through the virtue of a prosthesis can help a child to not just protect themselves, but also to attain further developmental milestones.
My experience was different. I had a traumatic injury. When I was a senior in college, I was involved in a car wreck. I was trying to drive a little too far for too long, fell asleep at the wheel of my 1970 Mustang Coupe and drove fully and right into a fully loaded semi-truck. I escaped with my life, but I wound up having a traumatic injury to my left forearm, and I crushed my forearm enough so I had to have an elective amputation of my hand. So I'm a short transradial amputee. So I'm a person who has lost their hand either through disease or some kind of trauma, and different than Debi, who's not referred to as an amputee. She's born congenitally with a limb absence. I, in fact, as well as many other people, became an amputee because of some type of trauma. So that's what got me involved in prosthetics way back in the 1970s. And I had a background in engineering and biological science, and as I got out of college, I was using all of the existing types of technology that was available to me in the early 1970s. I wasn't particularly happy with the function of the technology. I felt that in many cases it was holding me back from the capability I had of being truly two-handed. And so in 1976, when I went to graduate school, came out to Colorado, I began to develop some devices for myself that I thought would allow me just to do things more functionally. Shoot a bow and arrow, do some climbing, use tools more functionally, drive a motorcycle. I couldn't do that with the existing technology I had. So I evolved that device over multiple years, and then in 1980, 79, 80, it was the era we created TRS Prosthetics, a manufacturer. And then over 40 plus years, TRS continued to move on, and I became a manufacturer and designer of a variety of type of prosthetics devices. And that got me to where we are today. And just want to make a note, and may regret saying this a little bit, but Deb and I, we have over, between us, just the two of us, we have over 100 years of prosthetics experience to share with you. And that's why we're here, and that's what we want to do.
I think Bob's being super humble here. He's made an impact worldwide, people of all ages, developing prosthetic technology that has impacted lives. If you get to know Bob, you're going to find out that he actually talks to people. He talks to us as the prosthetic consumers and finds out what's important to us, and even uses some of our ideas and our thoughts, our complaints, our hopes, to help to develop new devices and technologies. And he does this internationally. That picture that you see in back of me, that was from 2016, the Cybathlon competition, where Bob went up against people of all ages, even those much younger than him, and competed in this international event where people were using prosthetic technology that included myoelectric or externally powered devices, as well as Bob used a body-powered device, and he beat them all. So oftentimes, we as a consumer, we might find ourselves seduced by certain ideas or levels of technology. And here Bob used something super simple like a body-powered prosthesis, and he was able to perform all of the tasks efficiently, participating actively, and performing with excellence. So
thank you, Deb.
Really proud of you. We've already alluded to the fact that both of us, in our own unique ways, we aim to make a difference. We want to equip persons, whether you are a person with a limb, an acquired limb loss, or a limb difference, or you're a member of the family of someone with these differences, or you're a healthcare provider. No matter who you are, we'd like to equip you with information that's unbiased. Hence the happy face that Bob showed earlier. We'd like to be able to engage you in a community and have you not just follow us, but contact us. And we're going to give you information about that toward the end of this presentation. And most of all, we'd like to be able to empower you with skills, with strategies, and with tips and tricks, as well as all the information that we're going to share.
Becoming an informed consumer is probably one of the most important things that an individual needs to do if they want to have quality life using a prosthesis. And I discuss this with individuals all the time. It's really important to educate yourself. You know, initially, in many cases, if you have an amputation due to a trauma like I did, you know, you conceive of yourself as a patient and you're treated kind of like a patient. But in reality, that changes pretty quickly. You have to learn to become an advocate. You need to learn about the technological opportunities that are out there for you. Because not everyone that you're going to work with is going to be able to provide you with the knowledge about the vast array of choices that you have and the options that you have. And so it's going to be upon yourself or your family to help you out. And that's why we're here to help expand your knowledge base as to all the varieties of kind of things and the technologies that are out there. Certain companies that you work with, certain clinics and things like that, will have real expertise in a particular technology or a particular manner of making a prosthesis. But they may not be aware, or they may not use other types of technologies. And so you have to be aware of all those other types of things, or try to gain knowledge of those so that you can possibly have access to those and get an opportunity to try them. Because what one clinic or one facility may use or recommend may not always be the very, very best thing for you. And you need to learn about that, because your needs are going to change. The more you learn about prosthetics and use prosthetics, the more you'll understand how your needs might be different than the technology that's being provided. You may need alternative types of technology.
Right, and that will help you to become a better advocate for yourself. Oftentimes it's easier for us to speak up on behalf of someone else, but we tend to minimize our own needs. So by becoming an informed healthcare consumer, it can also help you to better advocate for yourself with insurance companies as well as with your own practitioners, not to mention the other people in your life who want to hold you accountable for different responsibilities. I can remember being a young girl and having to do dishes in our household. It was kind of gender-specific tasks growing up. And I remember at one point telling my dad that I couldn't and shouldn't have to do the dishes because it could rust my prosthesis. And my father very quickly told me that such was not the case, and he held me accountable. Now, if I had better understood that my prosthesis was made out of aluminum, maybe I wouldn't have used that as an excuse, because aluminum doesn't rust, and it wasn't a very good argument. But the point is that when we better understand our technology, the materials that they're made from, what their uses are, the benefits, it will help us to be able to speak up for ourselves and be able to do things, to be able to perform and to participate more actively.
And it's a journey. It's one that everyone will make, and as you go down this path and learning more about prosthetics and being able to advocate for yourself, you'll have a better understanding of what you need and communicating that to your health provider, because there's an important relationship when you work with a prosthetist to really communicate with him or her as to what your needs are, because it's an intimate relationship. They need to be making something that's has a very intimate fit to your anatomy, and the more you can communicate accurately what your needs are, the better technology you're going to have, the better outcome you're going to have, and the better quality of life that you're going to have being a two-handed functional individual again.
Understanding this information also helps us to engage better with each other, with peers, to be able to explain our differences, as well as our common denominators. And that really just serves to empower all of us, because we can take on a new perspective. We can begin to understand information a little differently, particularly at maybe in our future self. We might reflect back on something that someone told us or shared with us previously. All of these things work together to help us to, yes, enjoy more participation and better performance, but it's all toward an end result of having a very positive quality of life. And I think that is something that we strive for in our own personal lives. We like to enjoy the moments that we have with friends, with family, with our work colleagues, with the people who we serve as our patient clients or our consumers, our customers. But the other piece about this, and why what we're trying to do is important, is because life is about change. Society all around us is constantly changing. Information is changing. There's new technologies, new developments all the time. So we are constantly in a state of becoming. We might think at different points that we've gotten there, we're where we're supposed to be, but that's kind of transitional. So all of this is about becoming, and becoming more informed, becoming better self-advocate, becoming more engaged, being able to become more participative and perform better, becoming more knowledgeable about our resources, because those are always changing too. So that ultimately we do have that very positive quality of life.
So we're going to do, overall, about 7 episodes. This is our introduction and for episode number 1, but we're going to cover in future episodes some of the things that you can see behind us, and technology and materials, sockets and interfaces, different kind of terminal devices, things that you put on the end of a prosthesis that help you do a variety of tasks or activities, and the rehabilitation process itself, and what's involved, and also develop some skills, living skills and strategies and things that will help you become a better person if you choose to use a prosthesis, or if you choose not to use a prosthesis as well.
So here we are. We're going to spend this morning a few more minutes talking about developing a better understanding and exploring different kinds of upper limb prosthetic technology and rehabilitation. Our thought, because we're both teachers, is that if we start off with a foundation that's firm and made of solid rock, that it will help to better inform you for future episodes. So today we're just going to talk about the words that we use and why we use them, as well as what they mean. First of all, we want to make sure that we identify you and recognize you. I think that's one of those sayings that one of the younger generations uses often. They say, "I see you."
I see you.
I see you, meaning that there's personal recognition. I get who you are. So we want to recognize you and who you are. And we've identified a few groups of people, right?
Yeah, we're talking about people that have a limb absence, but we're talking about a much broader audience that we're hoping to be able to reach out to and help with, and that is family members, peers, friends, and caregivers as well. We think we have a lot to share because of the amount of experience that we have over 100 years with caregivers, new caregivers, people may be coming into the prosthetics arena as a health caregiver, or even people who have many years involved already. I think we have things that we can share and help expand and broaden your perspective on people with who have a hand absence and on prosthetics. So we want to cover a little bit of hand absence terminology. We've already talked a little bit about the differences that Deb and I have from having a congenital hand absence, one that you're born with, as opposed to someone who has a traumatic limb loss who becomes an amputee. So the difference between congenital hand absence and amputee. So a person like Deb is not referred to as an amputee, I am. And that's an important distinction. Not so much for me, but it's a more important distinction for people who are born without a hand, because they are really not an amputee and aren't referred to as amputees.
Right, and I think another element to this is, regardless of the cause of the limb absence, one of the things in healthcare that we strive to do is to use person-first language and not label people. And some people might perceive the word amputee as a label and be offended by it, whereas others may not. And that might be a generational thing. Sometimes it's a cultural thing. Persons who are deaf prefer to be known as deaf individuals, for example. So there are exceptions to that, but people with a hand absence that's congenital, sometimes we are referred to as people with a congenital limb difference. Because the limb may not be totally absent, but it's different, very different from the other side. As Bob said, no, I don't refer to myself as an amputee. Truthfully, I prefer to not use the word anyway, because I like that person-first language. But someone with an acquired loss may be referred to as a person with an acquired loss or a person with an amputation. And these amputations may be a result of trauma, such as what Bob described that he experienced, or it could be related to disease or other sickness or some kind of casualty.
So getting down in the weeds a little bit, let's talk about some prosthetics terminology. Prosthesis is a word that can be easily stumbled upon. It's not always easy to pronounce, but prosthesis is the single prosthesis. Prostheses, using ES, is the plural for prosthesis. And then we get into the adjective prosthetic. And prosthetic is sometimes misused. People say, oh, you're wearing a prosthetic. Well, you're wearing a prosthesis. The prosthetic is usually an adjective, a prosthetic adapter, a prosthetic device. So we just wanted to help you with the clarity of some of that terminology so you yourself can communicate more accurately to people that you're talking with. And then there's something called a prosthesis. So a prosthesis is a little different animal. It's a slice of a difference between a prosthesis and an orthotic device. So a prosthesis encompasses typically the end of your limb, whatever type of prosthesis it might be, whereas a prosthesis does not encompass the end of your limb. It usually is a wrap, like a gauntlet or something, and we'll show you one in some future episodes. If it's around behind your wrist, that type of thing, and then you can put a prosthetic or a terminal device system onto it. So prosthesis with an O, prosthesis
with an E. Prosthesis is a noun or a thing, whereas, as Bob said, prosthetic is a descriptive. It describes something. It's an adjective.
So unilateral, meaning just one-sided. So if you have a unilateral hand absence or a hand difference or an amputation, it's just on one side. Whereas we have bilateral, meaning both sides.
Correct. And one of the things that's important to understand is that if both sides are involved, they may not be symmetrical. So someone might have a longer level loss on one side than the other. So there may require different prosthetic technology and different adaptive strategies as well.
Exactly, and these are the levels that we're talking about behind us. So we start with what would be a partial hand. Someone who might have a hand injury, could have been a saw accident, maybe any number of things, where they're missing part of their fingers, they're missing all their fingers, they're missing their thumb.
Any combination.
Any combination, that's referred to as a partial hand amputation. Then you have a wrist disarticulation. A wrist disarticulation is an absence at the wrist. The hand is gone right at the wrist itself.
Transradial refers to any level from just proximal or right before the wrist up to just below the elbow. Not including the elbow, just below it. So it could be someone like me who has a very short transradial, so my arm only goes about to there, whereas Bob is a longer transradial than I am. His is probably mid-forearm.
Yeah, a little bit longer than Deb is. So it's when in our lifetimes, the terminology has actually changed. When I first had my accident years and years ago, I was referred to as a below elbow amputee. Below elbow, just a simple reference. And that's evolved into transradial. Mm-hmm. Similarly, as we move higher, we're talking about an elbow disarticulation, your arm missing at the elbow. And then as we come above that, we get into what is
the humeral.
The transhumeral level.
Right. So that would be anywhere from just above the elbow to just below the shoulder. One of the things I just want to point out, you might be wondering about the word or the section of the word trans. So that's really short for transverse, and transverse means across or through. So you can think of this as being through the radial bone, and then through the humerus bone.
And transhumeral is also referred to as above elbow. That's another simple way to reference it. You move from there to what you would call a shoulder disarticulate, where the entire arm has been removed at the shoulder. Right. And then higher level than that, you go to
a forequarter. So forequarter is typically includes that top border of the shoulder, and usually involves some loss of the clavicle. And the reason that's important is because the clavicle bone actually helps to hold the arm in place. Without it, our shoulder would roll forward. So the importance of the clavicle with wearing a prosthesis is very, very important. For a person who has a clavicular involvement, it involves more stabilization at the shoulder with the prosthetic technology.
And that pretty much concludes what we wanted to talk to you about in this episode. Well, stay tuned. Our next episode, we'll talk about technology, materials, and fabrication.
So you can contact Bob at Instinctive Invention through bobradocy@gmail.com, and you can contact me at singlehandedsolutions@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.
We'll see you next time.